Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is World Watchers on the LNM Radio Network, and as promised, we're going to be talking with Brian Camden next. You've probably, you had to have seen the advertisement on the website on latenightinthe It's been there for quite some time. Hardened Structures, a world leader in the delivery of underground shelter systems. And with us right now is Brian Camden. Brian, welcome back to the show. It's been a while.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for having me back again.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I know Peter's full of questions here, and of course, I'm very interested to know how things have been going. I'm guessing after that big ball of fire landed in Russia, you probably got a few more calls, huh?
Well, it's, we've been in the business now about 22 years. We're mainly architects, engineers, and ex-Navy SEALs. Our biggest year actually was in 2010. It was people wanting the large concrete bunkers for 2012. And that, as far as volume-wise, that was probably it. Most of our work right now, our private sector work, is mainly in the mountainous areas out west or the Appalachians here on the East Coast. But quite frankly, our largest projects are in the Middle East right now.
Oh, interesting. Now, what type of projects are being done there? I mean, to an extent that you can talk about anyways.
It's military work, military and government. We do have probably one, maybe two private sector projects going on. Bomb shelter technology it's regulated under international law and U.S. law. It's illegal to transfer the designs or the technology outside of the U.S. or even to discuss it with foreign nationals here in the U.S. We have to have what's called a Defense Directorate of Trade Controls license by the U.S. State Department. And what we do is we're registered with the State Department, and we get on different design build teams that are going after specific military and government projects, like I said, mainly in the Middle East, some in Northern Africa, a couple of them in Europe, and it's mainly design build type projects. They could be anything from aircraft hangars to earth-covered magazines, to command and control bunkers, whatever basically whatever the client has out right now and they're looking for.
I see.
So basically the government will put out a bid for a particular job. They'll give you the blueprints and information on what they want, and you, like any contract, you'll put a bid in on it to hopefully win that contract and build what they want.
Yeah, it's design build type work. The end user will specify the type of facility that they're after, especially if it's an underground bunker type facility. You'd be surprised how many times when we're working for a foreign government, the bids actually go to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Winchester, Virginia. The Army Corps manages a number of these projects for friendly foreign militaries. And here again, what we would do, we'd provide the design engineering for the facility. We would team with a local contractor, usually someone in country, and a lot of this is relationship based. So we try to get on more than one team to pursue these types of projects. The Germans are probably our biggest competitor in it. They have quite a good engineering, and they've been in the Middle East for a number of years now.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe Saddam Hussein liked the German engineering bunkers. I recall seeing a documentary some years ago where he brought a whole design team in from Germany to build his deep underground military bunker. So no doubt that gave them a good foothold in the whole area.
Yeah. But here in the U.S., most projects or private projects are basically fortified home, which looks like just like a regular house. It's like a custom built house, usually 3, 4, 5,000 square feet, but it's ballistic rated, usually to a UL rating of 5 as a minimum, which is 1 round from an AK-47, and it's fire resistant. And the house has an underground bunker with it. Usually the underground bunker is the only portion that has the CBRN filtration system. And generally speaking, the only portion of the facility that is hardened against electromagnetic pulse is usually the electrical mechanical system and the life safety systems. The house itself is, it typically does not have an air filtration system for chemical or biological weapons, but it is designed for a, I guess, forced entry or direct assault type facility. But here again, this is like hiding in plain sight. The vast majority of these homes are located in, some of them in rural areas, but a lot of them are in suburban or in high-end neighborhoods. And they look just like regular homes.
Yeah, I've been on your website and look at wow, you guys have a lot of different varieties and levels that you can get involved in, and some very nice structures. I mean, some of the homes that you've designed are absolutely sweet. So from a consumer standpoint, I would have to, if I had the financing available, I would certainly be one of your
customers.
Customers, thank you. There's actually a little, I was going to say, there's actually a little place in a state, a few hundred miles from where I'm currently located, that I would just love to put a couple of your kind of drop-in facilities into and piece them out. It's a great location. Unfortunately, the shekels haven't presented themselves, or I should say the finances haven't presented themselves to do that yet, but maybe they will before too long. One of the things that I did notice is that really, I mean, you could have an underground bunker that is secure at a very, or I'd say reasonably economical price when you consider what you're getting for it.
Yeah, a steel prefabricated shelter, a basic model will run about $65,000.
Yeah, and you could if you had the finances, this is something that you could actually retrofit like right in your backyard if you wanted to. Yeah,
you certainly could. We use a steel prefabricated, usually on an existing house. It's hard to go into a home that's already built and put a shelter in the basement. You're really restricted by the foundation and the finished floor elevations, the height, and the actual makeup of the house itself. So whenever someone wants a bunker or a shelter and they want to detach that house, we will put it adjacent, usually enter in through a basement wall, or sometimes put in a connector that goes through a secret compartment into like a master bedroom closet, items along those lines there.
The proverbial secret wall.
We got quite a few of those. The swinging bookcase, the swing out brick wall, without getting into a lot of detail, but I mean, you're only limited by your imagination on them, really.
I bet. Well, what country in the Middle East is your largest customer, or are you allowed to divulge that information?
Yeah, I really probably should not say.
Okay. Where do you do most of your business over there? Countries around Syria, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we have the Gulf states. The Gulf Cooperative Council is friendly to the United States. Obviously, Iran isn't. The Kingdom we kind of stay out of. We've had some bad experiences there, but generally speaking, the areas over there, the other countries, they're friendly to the U.S. The U.S. has security agreements with them, and we're certainly not prohibited from going over there. And like I said, every project we do has to have U.S. State Department approval, and I've never had one that wasn't approved. I mean, they tell you what countries you can't go into, what countries you can't deal with, but it's you still get inquiries. I mean, I can remember probably 2 years ago we had an inquiry come in off the internet from my Iranian engineer wanting help designing blast doors going into a cave. Yeah. And of course,
alrighty then. I wonder what they're afraid of.
No idea. No idea.
So a lot of naturally, a lot of information on underground bunkers gets leaked one way or another, and there was a article probably about 3 months ago that there was a sizable project that's being done in Israel. I was wondering if you folks knew about that or were involved in it.
A couple of our engineers were. I can't comment on it, mainly because of security and also because I was not involved in it. I can tell you the Israelis, almost all of their residential buildings right now are shelters. They have perfected a blast blocking system that they have incorporated into almost all of their residential units. Their main CBRN filtration company, Bethel, no longer exports here to the U.S. They used to be one of our suppliers. It was probably one of the less expensive CBRN systems, and I don't think they've exported outside of Israel for probably a year or two now.
Just so our listeners understand, you say CBRN systems. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear filtration system. It's it's kind of like when people used to say NBC system, nuclear, biological, and chemical. Now it's the dirty bombs where you have a radiological dispersal device. Some years ago, the acronym was expanded to include all of that, and that's why most people now, when you get specifications, it'll actually say CBRN in order to carry the full range of agents that they want to have filtered.
And that's primarily to scrub the air that's coming into your bunker, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. To scrub the air coming into the bunker.
How long, when you have the filtration systems and your backup systems to have electricity of some sort, whether it's an exterior solar panel or an interior generator, how long can you actually stay underground in a bunker?
Well, one of the factors that the client usually establishes is the duration time for the shelter, the occupancy load and the duration time. And based on that, you can size the alternate power systems coming into it. You can, I've had clients who want us to be able to have a shelter duration of 5 years. You have most people are, 1 week, 30 days, 90 days, stuff like that. In order to have an extended shelter duration, you would have diesel generators, what we generally use. Diesel with an additive can last about 20 years when it's stored properly. If you get into an extended shelter duration, you encounter what's called shelter dynamics. and it's a psychological study of people in a confined area. For an example, the U.S. military considers a 25% loss of life as acceptable for an extended shelter duration. And obviously, most private clients wouldn't agree with that.
Yeah.
So there are psychological amenities that you place in the shelter, you design into the shelter itself in order to alleviate and to soften a extended shelter duration.
Interesting. Peter, I thought we lost you for a second.
No, I was actually just sitting here. I was trying to construct my next question. I was actually chatting with an heiress to the Moransk family shipping tycoons, and this was just about the time I was ready to. I was about finished with Letters to Earth. You Can Survive Armageddon, and she was on her yacht in the Mediterranean watching the forest fires of Greece at the time, and she said all about Armageddon. She said, I could go we have some place to go. We can easily, exist for 18 months with no problem. Which, fulfills actually a biblical prophecy in Revelation, but that's another story, which I might quote in just a few minutes. But here is somebody who is among the richest families in the world, the Moransk shipping line, and they have a place that they can shelter with no problem for 18 months. I would imagine that's got to be a fairly large facility. Otherwise, you're going to go stir crazy before too long if you don't, as you put it, Brian, have those psychological amenities.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've been in a shelter for any given time. I can tell you from a personal point of view. Sorry.
Oh, I think Peter's breaking up on us a little there.
I mean, from a personal perspective, I can't. After I've been in one for 48 hours, I'm anxious to get out myself.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, there are amenities you can put in there. I can tell you one of the hardest obstacles to overcome is humidity. You have a large buildup humidity, especially when the occupant load is full. But there are ways of I guess easing the time, so to speak, or passing the time of exercising within them. I can tell you without giving away different design techniques. There's everything from swimming pools to exercise rooms to movie theaters. Obviously, you have your medical facilities. A facility of that size, though, will probably, along with your standard airlocks, you're going to have some type of quarantine area. And you're also going to have to be able to dispose of not only your refuse, the garbage generated, but you're going to have, you got to anticipate some type of casualties in there. So you got to be able to have disposal capabilities built into the entire shelter program.
I see. So, yeah, if somebody should perish...
without getting too grisly, you need to have a way of dealing with it.
So what do you do in a case like that? I mean, is there like an incinerator or something that's built in?
No, it's a tube system we use for both trash and for corpses. It's almost like composting in a way. It's the ability for it to decompose isn't the issue as far as overcoming. It's one of the things that we have found to be hard to alleviate are the odors, the smells.
I'd imagine.
Well, I mean, just from trash. Just from, figure a family of 6 for a week, how much trash, even if you're eating freeze-dried food, you would generate in that time. And this isn't something you can put into a standard septic field, where your effluent can certainly be addressed, from the showers, the bathrooms, and what have you. Obviously it's larger, and so you have not only the storage and the removal issues, you have odor issues that actually have found have been sometimes persistent and difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I could imagine. I remember a few times when New York City had gone on strike, and a garbage pickup strike, and one of the first things that people complained about was the odors. And so, you've got all that decomposition going on, and then, who hasn't driven past an area you smell all of a sudden that smell of death where some animal, got run over, but made it into the woods and is rotting there off the side of the road. It's like, my goodness. That's just something that you just find naturally repulsive.
Yeah, imagine being in a confined space with it.
Yeah, no, I'll pass on that deal. I'll take my chances above ground.
Yeah, and knowing that you're going to be in that confined space for quite a while. So, yeah, that is something. So you help people actually plan this stuff out, I would imagine. Because even the smartest have to overlook something. So you pretty much tell them the things that they would have to contend with for the period of time they plan on staying underground or what have you. So I suppose that you have people who actually help them set out a plan.
Yeah, after doing it for 20-some years, it's fairly well established. You have a certain amount of cubic feet you need per person per month to feed them, and you can certainly use that as a factor to multiply out for the simple food, the air filtration, the filter changes and stuff. But a lot of it comes down to the group, the shelter occupants themselves. If it's a family group, if it's a survival group, if it's a military group, if it's a continuation of government facility, a lot of it comes down to what is the shelter not only provides the protective environment for the occupants, but a lot of times the shelter is a functioning facility that has a purpose, whether it's a command and control or here again, continuation of government, if it's some type of a specialized storage facility, projects along those lines there.
So after enough time and grade, then you pretty much come across every variable that presents itself and then how to deal with that.
Yeah, well, the principles are fairly well established. If once we know what kind of blast, overpressure, that'll establish, the building envelope, the composition of the walls, and what have you. When they tell us what kind of threats specifically we're looking at, whether it's electromagnetic pulse, tsunamis, a direct assault, the CBRN system is pretty well standard. The radiation shielding codes, they haven't changed ever since we've been in it. This was set by the U.S. government and hasn't, and most Western nations follow it all. It really hasn't changed any. As far as initial radiation protection, the change, I think, a lot has been in technology. Especially in the protection of the SCADA systems, the automatic systems. If you're going to protect an entire facility up to 100 dB from an EMP attack, it's the shielding and the requirements for it here again are well known and well established. The art to the whole thing is achieving what's called balanced survivability, and that's probably the main reason people would come to Hardened Structures. And balanced survivability is a condition where the shelter itself, the shelter walls, the shelter envelope, the shelter systems, and the shelter subsystems all withstand the same threat event at the same time, at the same threat level. There is no Achilles heel. And that is really the art to shelter design. I mean, I go online so many times, people will ask me, well, this shelter company over here is building this at half your cost. Well, you look at it and you can tell that it's a nice little steel round culvert they're sticking on the ground, but it has no EMP protection whatsoever. They can say it does, but if you look at the design, you know that it's basically selling to occupants a nice tomb or to be buried in. It's being able to achieve balanced survivability. That's the real art to shelter designs.
No doubt. I've seen, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen the different programs that have been on. There was one where they were building shelters and then testing them in strange ways. I'm sure it was all done by the producers to find somebody who was smart enough to turn around and put one of these together. But I mean, there was really not what I would call any kind of scientific testing that's going on there. These are guys that are building, like you said, a nice underground coffin. It's when I looked at your structures, or when I was looking at your website, the first thing that impressed me was like, hey, if these guys are building for the military, maybe they know what they're doing when it comes to the homeowner. Just maybe they have a clue as to what's going on. And so when I was looking at these other companies that are out there, it's like, okay, well, you're going to pay a little bit more for it, but you'll come out on the other side, provided that your parameters have met the threat level. Speaking of which, what do you find is the number one thing that people are wanting to prepare themselves for? What threat do you find the most on people's minds?
Well, I would say that economic collapse or a breakdown in law and order that could be caused by any number of events. A number of people are worried about solar flares. They are worried about EMP. The book 1 Second After, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes. But the threat event scenario is an EMP burst. But the associated threat, the ancillary protection program, is obviously people are hungry, desperate, looking for food, and trying to take what you have. So the facility program requires, yes, EMP protection, but then it also requires protection against forced entry, direct assaults, the other threats that are secondary or resulting from the primary threat event scenario. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you survive, what good is it if you survived the EMP or blast or tsunami or whatever it is, only to then, you've got whatever recovery time society needs before it's actually safe to pop your head up out of the gopher hole, so to speak.
Yeah, that or most of these facilities are like self-sustainable. These people aren't on the ground. They're, they have, some type of crop cultivation or a storage facility. They have the alternative energy outside.
Sure.
I would say about 90% of them anticipate moving around the immediate surrounding area of their facility during this time of turmoil. And so then you get into how do you protect the occupants of the house from the different types of attacks? And what is the defensive posture? What is the capabilities of the occupants themselves? What kind of skills do they have? And then how do you incorporate countermeasures within the design itself?
Yeah.
You have deadfalls in there, pitfalls, traps, spears coming out the wall.
Well,
Indiana Jones tomb stuff.
And what we do is one of the owners of Hardened Structures is ex-Navy SEAL Commander Jim Liddy. He's the son of G. Gordon Liddy. And he was one of the original authors of what was called red teaming. And red teaming is where they would go and they take like the FBI building, and they would actually come up with an assault plan themselves. They would watch it over a period of time, figure out its weaknesses, come up with a strategy for attacking it. They do it on government buildings on a regular basis. And so what we would do, the client will hire them, they will come in, and they will red team a facility, a compound. And they would, usually, and here again, I'm a civil engineer. I've never been in the military, so I'm kind of speaking a little from what I've read from their reports. But it usually comes down to like 3 or 4 scenarios. It's either if the house itself is sitting, let's say, like a farmhouse, semi-rural, the attacks are usually a lone sniper in the woods shooting at them, the pickup trucks rushing up the road, full of rednecks or what have you. Then the other one's the actual militarily planned assault on the facility. And based on the different types of red team assaults on that particular facility, then we would design countermeasures, and then you would also put in there, you would have to assume that the whole thing is overrun, and then you have to retreat. So if you retreat, how do you counterattack? What are your methods for coming back and reclaiming the facility? And these guys, here again, they're mainly Navy SEALs, everyone that we have anyway. And they have it fairly down to a science, and the report itself is usually about an inch thick, and then they go with the client, they go over the different scenarios, and if this happens, this is where you go. If this happens, this is what we recommend as a response to it.
I see. Now, I have some questions from the chat here. Some folks are asking about meteors, such as what happened in Russia. Are there actually bunker facilities that could withstand this type of bombardment?
Well, yes. To answer your question, there's a very simple rule in bunker construction. The level of protection is only governed by the size of the budget. So a meteor like what you had in Russia, which is, flattened hundreds of square miles, you would have to, I would assume, have a fairly deep earth bunker. Now, a hit like that, you'll have significant seismic activity associated with it, along with when you have a blast, a surface burst from like a nuclear weapon, you have shear motions that propagate radially out from the center of the impact. So I would imagine, and here again, let me just say, I'm not an astronomer and I've not done a facility for a meteor impact. But if you base it on what a surface burst would have been of, let's say, a 5 megaton weapon, I think you could probably design a facility that could take that shock. Of course, you would have supercharged heated air coming in, that you'd have to have a button-up period for, I imagine, a good, good while there.
Okay, and what about floods? Such as, I mean, say you have one of these underground bunkers, and I don't know, ocean water comes over land or something along them lines. Well, for one, if it doesn't recede, you're in a lot of trouble, I think. But it's saying that it's going to recede, would these facilities be able to withstand something like that? I mean, they wouldn't. Are they built to fight against, say, a flood?
Well, certainly, yeah. We have done that on a number of occasions. Even in the mountains, we've had clients who, they put a shelter in the mountain, but they figuring 1,000-foot tsunami is going to hit. When you design for submersion of a facility, what you generally do is you take the finished grade elevation of the surrounding area. Let's say it's 200 feet above sea level, okay? Mm-hmm. And you have to have a general scenario of what size the tsunami is. Is it a 200-foot tsunami? Is it a 500-foot tsunami? What size is it? The client has to give you some kind of guidelines. So let's base it on, let's say, 1,000-foot tsunami. You would calculate the area, the elevation of the land versus the size of the tsunami, and come up with the time it's going to take for the water to reside. The water the water's not going to stay in the air. It's going to lower and go back down to the lower elevations. What we generally do will come up, is it 50 hours, is it 100 hours, what is it, before the water subsides. And then we usually double that as a factor. Now, when you have a facility that is underwater, or a facility that is experiencing fire in the immediately surrounding areas where you cannot pull in air, they're both basically the same, then the facility must be equipped with CO2 scrubbers and oxygen machines based on the occupant load within the shelter. You got to be able to provide fresh air in the button-up mode, and to be able to dissipate oxygen. The same principle a submarine runs on, basically. Okay. The very same principle. The actual air intakes and everything has to have with fast-acting valves on them in order to shut off. And then you should assume, some clients don't really care, but you really should assume that the water will never reside. So you should incorporate self-rescue supplies within the shelter itself. And if you design it right, the airlock that you use for entering and exiting a shelter, the one that, one door closes, the other one opens, you can actually use that and design it to be able to enter and exit out of the shelter when it's submerged. You flood that room, open the outer door, and let it go out. And so you should design for a tsunami, for a submersion. Right. You calculate it based on which the time it'll take for the water to reside. Then we usually multiply that by 2 in our calculations. But then you should also figure that if there's a pole shift or something that occurred during it, maybe it will not reside. And if that's the case, you should have self-rescue equipment within the shelter itself.
I see. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Now, what if it was something like that? I mean, I'm sure that if people have enough funding, they probably are able to, create things that are good for what, 10, 20 years? I mean, that's got to be a possibility, right?
Well, it certainly is. I mean, and it can easily be accommodated. I mean, here again, the level of protection, it's only limited by the size of the budget.
Yeah, I was just going to say it limits by how big your pocketbook is. So, interestingly enough, we know that the government has an extremely large pocketbook, and I remember seeing a couple of years ago they did a expose on both the Greenbrier Hotel, which was, I guess, the prime location for a number of years as a fallout bunker for the White House and for Congress. and Cheyenne Mountain, as they've done several documentaries. I understand that NORAD has moved out of Cheyenne. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's what I understand. But if these are the obsolete of what because I mean, they wouldn't show the latest and greatest technology, but if these are the obsolete, what is the extent of what they have?
Well, obviously I can't comment on any specifics. I mean,
obviously not. I don't want to know depths, heights, lengths, widths.
Let me just say, the government's been on a shelter building binge, I guess, for the last 10, 15 years. I mean, my knowledge of them is extremely limited. Only the ones that we've been, may have or may not have participated in. But anything that is related to a government shelter, obviously, is classified.
Yeah, I would imagine that it would be, and we wouldn't want to get you in any hot trouble, or any hot water, I should say, or into any trouble. But you look at what they're showing us. Well, this is where the old facility was, because they don't say where the new facility is, but they let you know where the old one was. There was something that I had seen just within the last was the largest house or residence, as it's being called, that is being built in Arkansas. I guess it's just outside of Little Rock, I think. It's supposed to be 85,000 square feet with a deep bunker system under it. Have you been involved, or do you know of the facility in which I'm talking of?
Yeah, I can't comment on that. It's
okay. It's another one of those things.
I'd rather just not.
I totally understand.
Yeah, let me just say, probably the number one rule with having a shelter is keeping it secret.
Yep.
So, what killed the Greenbrier was the expose in the magazine that, that did it in, back in, I guess it was the 70s when it first got published. A shelter, part of the program to it is, unless it's a community shelter, a civil defense shelter, it's keeping the location secret. When I first started in this business 22 years ago, one of the engineers who'd been in it through the Cold War told me there's a saying in the shelter industry, an old saying that goes like this: if you disclose the location of a client's shelter, one of three things will happen to you. If it's a private client, their lawyer will sue you. If it was a government client, they're going to come and arrest you. If it was one of the Italians, you'll just disappear. And I can tell you that saying has proved true over the years.
No doubt. Nobody wants to have their location given away. One thing that I did read, and I'm sure you can comment on this, Russia has been building quite a few civic underground shelters around Moscow.
Europe's way ahead of us. You look at Switzerland; they require 100% of all houses to have a shelter. Finland requires 75%. The United States, one of the few countries that does not shelter its population. Russia's always had shelters, always.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Are there any programs for civic shelters in the United States?
There are. I don't know of them. I mean, there's FEMA. There's FEMA grants for tornado shelters. We did one for the University of Kentucky a while back, but these are storm type facilities, tornadoes and stuff like that. I don't know of any federal program. let me think for a second, that actually addresses, you know, a large civilian shelter in place type deal. You know, mainly, you know, they always tell you to go to the high school gym.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it.
And Switzerland,
Switzerland is 100% of the population.
And they're on top of a damn mountain.
I know it, but I can tell you you know, as architects and engineers, we have to design right now the U.S. is under the International Building Code, the IBC. We used to be the Uniform Building Code, but the IBC in itself really does not address shelters. So the military specifications that are established for like blast, ballistic, EMP, CBRN are guidelines that we use during the design. But the actual, I guess, the Bible for shelter designs is called the Swiss Directives for Shelters. The Swiss are really the experts in this stuff. I mean, they'll tell you, I mean, they've got it worked out, especially for residential application. Yeah, they're very knowledgeable. They're very experienced. They've solved most of the problems, and there's a book out called the Swiss Directives, Technical Directives for Shelters. It's probably published in the 60s or 70s, and it's amazing how many of those principles have never been changed and are still applied today.
So they set the bar, and the United States hasn't even tried to jump.
The United States leads the world in radiation shielding codes, EMP protection, probably CBRN filtration systems, although the fins, you know, with the Temet products are very good. They're usually specified on most military projects. Censoring, U.S. is very, in my opinion, the U.S. sensors are certainly better than the European. One of the problems the Middle East is running into now, you know, they've set up a censoring system around some capitals that are reading constantly false positives. So it's not even worth the money they put into it. The U.S. sensors, I think, are much better. They're certainly more expensive, but you get, you know, very, very rarely do you get false positives. And when you have a continued experience with false positive, it's kind of like the boy crying wolf all the time.
Yeah, town I used to live in, they actually passed a law where they give you one, the alarm system for your house, they give you one freebie. If they have to come out more than once and it's a false alarm, you're going to be issued a citation. And so, yeah, that could be very annoying very quickly, and especially to the local authorities. But regardless, I have a question. How do you, from an EMP blast, and I have to believe that's on a lot of people's minds. It's been on my mind. And that could come from a nuclear blast in the atmosphere or a solar burst. And we're told, NASA told us that, hey, there's a really good chance that this is going to happen.
Yeah, well, they're different decibel levels, extremely different. You know, a nuclear weapon is a high dB, you know, 75 to 100, whereas a solar flare is going to come in much lower. A solar flare will energize the transmission lines, the power lines, runs back to the transformers and melts the transformers. Kind of like what happened in Quebec in '89 is a perfect example of eruption, a solar eruption. The EMP burst in the air, on the other hand, is going to fry just about every electronics within line of sight, and probably within, depending on its height, you know, the yield of the weapon, the height of the burst, and the proximity of the geography, you know, a well-placed EMP burst in the atmosphere would knock out, you know, most of the East Coast, you would think. I'm not an expert in it myself. shield against that EMP, which is probably 99% of our work, requires, there's a military standard 188, which is the specifications for critical infrastructure and time urgent facilities. It requires a conductive shield around the exterior of the house or around the facility. It's that simple. If you wear a pacemaker, you have to do the entire facility. If you just do the mechanical and electrical systems for the life safety, you can then concentrate it all and just shield the mechanical room like that. You got to figure that your alternative energy system, your solar and all that, is probably going to be sacrificial. So we design it for plug and play, where if the EMP event happens, it burns up the solar array. You go down to your storeroom, you take it out, and you plug it right into stanchions that are out there. EMP, the design mitigation for it, the shielding. The U.S. really is the world's leader in it, and quite frankly, it's probably one of the reasons we get selected on foreign military projects. I mean, most any engineers can design for an artillery shell hitting or 1 bar, 2 bar blast overpressure, but hemp verification, hemp shielding, hemp maintenance, the actual hemp program. That was designed by the U.S., primarily U.S. Air Force, and we're still the world's leaders in it.
Now, a couple other questions that I had from the chat, and you might have just covered this a bit, but have any governments that you have worked with, have they built facilities for their civilians? I guess mainly the United States. I mean, is there a place that you know of or can talk about where citizens would be directed to if something besides FEMA, where people would be directed to maybe to be protected? Probably not, huh?
No, I don't know any in the U.S. I mean, we just bid on one in Kuwait for 500 people. The Indian government's doing them for like 1,000 people at a shot. I don't know of any here in the U.S., but that doesn't mean they're not doing it. They could certainly well be doing it. There's a core set of contractors they use over and over, and we're not involved in probably 99% of that here in the U.S. They have a select group that they use, and these companies are certainly a lot larger than we are.
I see. And the last question I have is cities. Have you, and again, I don't know if you could even say if you did, but have you ever encountered any like underground cities? We've had a lot of reports come back to us about government actually having farms and things like that in facilities underground.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I'm trying to remember what non-disclosure agreements I'm under right now. Before I answer that.
Well, I don't want you to get yourself in trouble. So,
yeah, let me just say there are very large shelter complexes here in the U.S. that involve underground crop cultivation. I know one of them where they've isolated, they actually can grow crops in the dark, where they isolated the light spectrums necessary for photosynthesis in it. You have aquaculture and stuff like that, where they're completely sustainable, and they're, 100, 200,000 square foot facilities. There's the one that is known is the salt mine in, where is it? I want to say Missouri, or one of those states. And they actually have incorporated it, and I mean, made it kind of almost a commercial venture there. then you have some people who've done the missile silos. The Titans lend itself somewhat to it. Of course, the Atlases are, they're prohibitive in their designs as far as what you can actually accommodate.
Yeah, I've seen a few of the documentaries. As a matter of fact, there's a real estate company that, I guess, bought some of these missile silos when they went up for auction by the government, and they've refurbished the whole inside of the missile silo essentially to form a little community.
Yeah, we provide the engineering for it.
Cool.
Our company. Yeah. It's, missile silos, I've always thought when you go into them, they're dank and dark, and if it's an actual silo like an Atlas F, you look down that thing, it looks like you're looking into the bowels of the earth. It's usually about 140 feet deep. I think it's 47 foot around, or 45 feet, and the walls in itself I think are about 7 foot thick. The thing is, everyone knows where they are. And when everyone I've seen, and now I've only been limited to probably a dozen or two, there's groundwater contamination. There's usually lead paint in them. A lot of times the asbestos has been removed, but we've encountered asbestos a number of times. And the cost to renovate it, you could, for the same cost, you go out and build yourself a brand new shelter that no one knows about, and in a nice location.
Without all the contamination and government surplus toxins.
Well, not so much that. It's without everybody and their brother knowing where it is. That's the thing. I mean, you don't need a 7 foot thick wall, because unless you plan on launching some ICBMs, and the cribs are all gone out of them anyway. They're just a big hole in the ground. The crib's already out. So the money that you would spend on that versus taking that same money and going and buying a pristine property somewhere with alternative energy, streams, fresh water, and all that, you end up with a better facility, in my opinion.
Sure.
There's some people who differ on that.
One was designed to live in, the other one was designed to shoot a missile out of, and then basically duck and cover before the incoming missile hits you.
Well, yeah.
And so,
the Titan sites are better. They're obviously a lot larger. It's a coffin type. It's not a silo type. It lends itself more to a development. But even those I have found to be moldy, I guess would be a good word for it. They're not, you got to remember, they weren't designed for a lot of people to be inside of. So the air intakes, the air exchange that you need by converting it into a high occupancy area, kind of defeated in my opinion, the balanced survivability aspect of buying a missile silo. They certainly weren't EMP shielded. You'd be much better off buying a former AT&T site, communication site, which they still sell. They were grounded very well. Most of them were EMP protected. They did lack blast overpressure, but you could certainly add blast protection to it. They're not as well known. The ones I have been in personally, I just thought were much better suited for some type of survival community versus the silos. But that's, here again, that's looking at it from an engineering point of view, and as the return on investment and a value engineering kind of view to it.
Yeah, and I get a kick out of some of these TV shows. One is this family is building this castle to survive in. Here's the problem: it's on TV, and everybody knows where to go now. And then there's another guy. He actually welded school buses together under the ground and then covered them with dirt. And he expects that to do justice for him. And I say good luck with that. I'd rather be up where I can see if it's going to be something like that.
I remember the school bus one. It's like shipping containers. A lot of people say, "Oh, we just couldn't use a shipping container." I have yet to be able to do a shipping container correctly where it didn't leak. That's not to say it can't be done, but I would just as soon strip it down to just a tube steel frame and redo the whole thing. You can pick up shipping containers fairly inexpensive. It would be a good form to pour concrete around once you waterproof it. It's just I guess if you're looking to survive and you're looking to survive a catastrophic event, why would you want to take the cheap way out unless it's just, a budgetary issue? When for about the same amount of money, you go and fabricate something for yourself, and it'd be waterproof. It'll have the filtration system in it. We have agreements with about 5 different steel firms now from the West Coast to the East Coast, because the trucking costs are high, where we can fabricate a steel shelter and have it delivered for not much more than you're going to convert a shipping container for.
Okay, well, that's great news, and it's same thing. It's like if you were having brain surgery, you wouldn't pick the student over the veteran, to work on your head like that. So, if it's about survival, I guess if you're one who really believes that something's coming and that you need to be protected from it, then if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right, or it's all a waste of time in the long run. So, but Brian, we're about at the end here, and I want to thank you for coming back on the show. I want to give you an opportunity, however, give out websites. We've got your banner on the LateNightInTheMidlands.com website, and people should know that Hardened Structures is offering an LNM radio listeners a free consolation, normally of a $500 value. So if you click the banner on the website, you'll save yourself a cool $500. But Brian, anything you'd like to get out there before we close? By all means, go ahead.
Well, just the shelter industry evolves based on current social and economic threats that are out there. I guess the one thing to keep in mind is that no one knows what the future is. And anyone who specifically says something's going to happen on a specific date, God bless them. Maybe there is some revelation to it, but I guess in the final analysis, this is asset protection. A shelter is asset protection, and most people identify their family as their most important asset. And when you look at it that way, it has a very good return on investment. And actually, facilities, houses that have shelters also have a very high resale value to them. So look at it as insurance, basically.
If you've got a 401k that you're afraid is going to get caught in an economic collapse, a hardened shelter just might be the thing to invest in. But it's better than letting it sit there in the banking saying, my money. And I'm sure a lot of listeners of ours have been investing in a 401k plan for a long time. And, we've only seen our money erode year after year. As a matter of fact, it's month after month now. Just go to the grocery store, you'll see. It makes sense to take that money, which is supposed to be invested in growing, out of the risk of an economic collapse and put it into something that will turn around and save you and your family and be an asset. Brian, I was just going to say, hopefully I can put those shekels together here and come up with the financing to do the project that I would like to do. And I'll be talking to you again if that happens.
Okay, well, we appreciate it. And here again, for all of the listeners at Late Night, Hardened Structures does have a special financial arrangement with you guys. We certainly appreciate this association, and any of your listeners will certainly get treated not only very well, but very economically. So we'd love to talk to you, and it was certainly a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and keep up the good work, and we'll have to not make it such a long span in between talking with you next time. All right.
Okay, anytime at all.
All right, my friend. Keep up the good work, and thank you very much for all you do.
And
absolutely.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Good night.
Take care.
Okay, everybody, that's Brian Camden, and again, like we said, if you click on that banner, if you're one who's considering, and I just want to say this too, for those who say, oh, it's all fear mongering, it's this. Look, tornadoes are real, my friends. If you have not turned on the Weather Channel, or you've not looked out your window or kept up with what's going on around the world, then I feel for you. But the fact is, they do projects as small as just tornado shelters. Everything from tornado to, nuclear explosions. I mean, they do it all. And, and I don't look at it as fear mongering, because that's not, look, I'll tell you right now, I've been advertising for Hardened Structures now for, about 2 years now, a little over. And I'll tell you right now, I haven't had one sell off my website, and you know why? Because I don't push it. It's there. If you need it, I've had people tell me millions of times over, oh, Michael, you should have some kind of solution on your website for these things that you talk about. You should, and it's like, I'm not trying to load up with survival gears and things like that. I mean, we have a few things that I believe in, such as the solo stove, which we promote on the front page, the home page. But these are things that will come in very handy. And if you have it within your budget, and you're one who believes that something's going to happen, and let's just face it, when it comes to tornadoes and superstorms, you better believe that stuff is real. I mean, where have you been? So if you can afford to protect your family, why not do it? See, I can't afford it. So, I'm going to be above ground, dodging things, I guess. But at the same time, if I wanted to really make money, if that was my goal, I'd be here telling you, oh, yes, Planet X is real, and this is real, and that's real. I could prove it. I've seen it. I got pictures I photoshopped for you. I mean, I could be doing all that stuff to sell, but I don't do that because that's not who I am. But it's there. And if you're going to buy, why not buy from Hardened Structures? Because not only will you get quality, but you'll also help Late Night in the Midlands fund this show. So that I wanted to put that out there. But yeah, you save a good $500 on a consolation if you go off of our website to inquire with Harden.